Beginning our Daf, Mesechta Nazir Daf Chav Zayin. We're in the middle of a discussion from the previous Daf. We had many, it was interesting Daf, the last Daf, which we had many different qualifications in this halacha of this halacha Mishma Sinai, according to Shlokas, not halacha Mishma Sinai, but it's this halacha of mois stumim, when you have the unspecified funds, yipul in the dava. There are many different teachings qualifying that regarding what is that like. Now, one of the last things we said was that, okay, it was only said regarding monies. But if it's not money, then we're going to consider it as mefurashis. What's the case of that? Let's say behema. Now, behema itself, we qualify and we say, wait a second, it's only behema tamimim. But if it's taka balmum, the taka balmum is similar to that of monies. And then we had another man that said, no, even nascha, even the silver bars like monies. Another man that says, but let's say beams of wood, okay, that won't be. Now, the Svara Tesa said, which we're going to discuss a little further today, was, okay, what's the difference? Tamimim, balmum, who cares? The difference is because tamimim takes time to sell. So in the amount of time trying to sell, he might have thought, thinking, I could use that for the chatas, and that would have chatas muravim ben, and it's like mefurashis b'tarayvis, and therefore that's a problem. So it all has to go to waste. Balmum, I could sell it right away. I wouldn't think about it. There's no delay of time. So it's like my stumim. It's like money. I can sell it right away. I don't have to wait. So therefore, then you're going to say it's going to be yiplul in the dava. And the Gemara continues explaining and saying, wait a second. Based on all your svaros, Talmid Chachamim, the Amoiris, you're telling me that it has to be dafka monies. So then it should also exclude birds. And the Gemara is going to get into discussion. Well, maybe yeah. And the Gemara say no, it can't be. And the Gemara is going to get into a whole discussion about how this relates to this halacha of excluding behemoths and birds, because it's stafka regarding mo'is, stumen, and not regarding other things too. Some discussing today's daf are whether the halacha of stumim, unspecified funds, yibul in the dava, will all be brought as oilis, like kites mizbeach, which is like when the kites is the terminology of dessert or whatever, when it's not being used. Does that apply only to mo'is, or even to behema, nascha, as we mentioned at the end of the previous daf? Also, we're getting to halacha about ish megalech al naziris aviv. A man could use the haircutting process of his naziris with the funds of his father's naziris. However, but if the father is separated, let's say chatzis funds, then you can't use that for your own naziris. The halacha of actually any even if you separated funds and money and animals for your own, you can't use it for a different chiyuv that you yourself have. Now, after the Nazir is complete, the Nazir brings three kavanahs that we mentioned a few times. Kivsa, a female lamb, is for a chatzas. Kebes, a male lamb, is for a oila. And the ayil, a ram, is for a shlam. Now, there's halacha that comes up in today's daf of enakin misparshas. The pair of birds that you bring, which many karbanas bring a pair of birds, one's a chatzas, one's a oila, is only either b'lekichas ba'al when the owner buys it, or ibasis kain, or when the kain actually goes and performs it, but no other time in between. And that's going to come into this similar idea about what's with the guy in between, in the middle. Did he think of it? And if he thought of one, is that going to be like our chatzas b'tarayvis, or like, this problem thinking in that? So, again, in the previous daf, we had this halacha that we said the mois stum and yipul in the dava for the nazis three karbanas, even though you have to make chatzas mu'rav ben, we said it's all used for us in the dava. So we had this machlekes regarding how to qualify this teaching. V'nachim Yitzchak, he said, okay, behemoth balmum is kastumit kamamen because the animal taints only kedusha dam, can be transferred immediately, whereas behemoth tamima does not have a mum or nascha like precious metals or sabashakairis, wood beams. They were like mavarash, not like mammon, because the act is not transferable immediately. And again, we had a svar from a Bein Tam. We're going to see Tyson today maybe differently, but there's a delay, and that delay will make it not like money itself. So the question that we started explaining was asked and said, wait a second. So let's actually go 5 lines off on the bottom of the Amid, just jump right back into that point. So the Gemara says, Elamiyata. If that's the case, okay, Ma'is v'lay oifis. So then what should come out is that you should also make the same miyut. Just like you're saying money's a dafka and it can't be a pile of beams and whatever, it can't be this and that. So okay, so birds should also be excluded. So we had started explaining in Taisus that he said, it seemingly would sound like that we're excluding things similar to beams and similar to things, a bar of silver, which would be like a duck and chickens, whatever it is. But Tais says you can't say that because as we'll see in the Gemara later on, that it sounds like we're making like Teirin and Bnei Yaina, which are birds that are fit to be karbanas. So, okay, that's what we're talking about. We should exclude that from the halacha of moistum because it's not money. Then says Taisus, he says, wait a second, at the end of the day, we're talking about by a Nazir. Now, for a Nazir, these birds are not fit at all. So, regarding the Nazir, even if it's turtle doves and pigeons, which are fit to be karbanos, for him, again, it's a similar type of discussion we had at the end of the previous daf, should be like avos and matan the gun, should be the same thing. So it says, no, since they're fit to be some carbon, so a kedusha zakuf will take effect on them, just like we said for parim and seirim that we explained before, and therefore it will be excluded, like behemoths are excluded, because they do have some kedusha zakuf, and therefore you would have to wait till it develops a blemish. So too by the birds. But it says, wait a second, it's still difficult, because if you're going to tell me that kedusha zakuf takes effect on these toirim, these turtle doves and bnei yaina, so wait a second. You can't redeem birds for its monetary value because there's halacha that the Gemara brings in Menachos and other places that oifes don't have pigeon. This whole halacha that we know when it develops a blemish and you can redeem a carbon is not said on bird karbanos, only said on animal karbanos. So wait a second. That means it's not fit for a nazir at all, not to be sold and not to bring as karbanos. So what halachic status will it have anyway? And also he says that Rav Chizda, the Gemara is going to bring in a moment the halacha of Rav Chizda on this. He's talking about by chiyuv kinin, by those who are obligated in pairs of birds. It sounds like that the Gemara's question is even by those who are obligated in pairs of birds, not just like a nazir who's not obligated in pairs of birds. So therefore, it says Taisa, based on these questions, it would seem to me that what the Gemara is asking over here is not even with a nazir. We're asking on those who are obligated in pairs of birds, like a zav and a zava, and similar types of individuals that have to bring pairs of birds, where so then they also have the same halacha of stumen like by Nazir, because we had mentioned before the halacha of halacha Sinai was not only said by Nazir, it was v'chol dedamile, like we said, anything else that also has chiva kinin, because chiva kinin is two karbanas for one obligation. That's what Masechtas Kinin on the pairs of birds, like a matzayra or yeledes or zav. They have to bring two karban. That's the chol dedamile. So the halacha Sinai stam moi stumen medibel nedava is there also. Or, he says you could even say it's Toma by a Nazir, but a Nazir Tame. A Nazir Tame has to bring two turtle doves, one chatzis and one noila. And says Taisa, Allah was also said by Nazir Tame, as it sounds like from the end of the parak. Okay, fine. So we got the case. Taisa is developing the case. We got the case. We're talking about chiva kinin. We're talking about that you're obligated to pair of birds, whether Nazir or something dedamale. Okay, so what's the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question like this. It should be moist for the eifers. In other words, if the obligatory pairs of birds that you have to bring, that you separated were Tyron and Bnei Yaina, but you didn't specify when you bought it, you didn't say which one's the Chatas, which one's the Oila. And the guy died before sacrifice, or let's say the husband was Meifer, the Neder of this Nazir who was Tamei, whichever case you want to say. That's what we're saying in the Gemara, that we shouldn't give it a halacha of stumin regarding this, that the halacha is that a kohen can be makriv which one he wants to as a chatas, which ones is a oila, because based on what you're saying, that you say that only monies are stumin and not behema, that a behema is considered like meforish b'tarayvos. It's like you told me that that's what happens by an animal. It's like the three bulls are like explicit, but they're mixed together, which they all have to go to waste. It's not like stumim. So here, if the person would have thought on one of them to be a chatos, so too regarding oifos, you have to be concerned, if you didn't specify when you bought it, that maybe the guy thought about it between when he bought it and when it's being sacrificed. Maybe he thought that, I want that one to be chatos, that one to be naila. And then the kohen cannot be makriv it, whichever one he wants to. That's the Gemara's question. There's halacha that's going to come up in the daf, that you get to decide which one it's going to be, either when you bought it or when it's going to be sacrificed. The Gemara's kasha is saying, wait a second, this that we get the kohen to decide, that should be only by stumin. But you told me that behemoths, and so too the Gemara is asking, oifos should not be like stumin. Why? Because it's delay of time, let's say the way Rabbi Tam said it. So maybe you thought about it, that you wanted one to be one, and therefore it's like mufurish, but tarez, we don't know which one it is. So therefore, how could you should not allow the kohen to decide. No one said not yet, but that's the Gemara said, it should be v'lo oifis. oifer should not be like stumen. So the Gemara says, okay. V'chitim, if you're going to say, maybe you're right, hachanami, maybe, okay, fine, shkoich. Oifers are not stumen. And then the Kohen would not be able to decide what the halach is. But says the Gemara, no. Because Elohadam Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says the halach eina kinim is parshais. The pairs of birds are not specified. And again, you have to hold on tight because this is all going to be explaining based on our interpretation we said in Taisa up until now. This is going to switch. But Taisa says that, not Taisa. The Rav Chizda says eina kinim is parshais. The pairs of birds are not specified what they are. Either when the owner bought it, ibas is kain, or the kain makes it. Amai, why? Hamois gemirla. The halacha Moshe Messina was said only on monies. This is not monies. So if it's not monies, it's like mufarashin, like you told me by behema and nascha and svarshal kairis. So you shouldn't be allowed to have the kohen decide what it is b'shas hakrava, because it's not stumin. That's the Gemara's kasha on based on Rav Chizda. So on that continues the Gemara Omalei. So on that, Rav Papa responded to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. He says, wait a second. Tamech, according to your reasoning, hadit nan. What do you do with the Mishnah of Memhei and Aleph? What does he want, Mishnah Memhei? What does the Mishnah say over there? Mishnah says, Shimon Lil Oimer, he says, Hevi Sholosh Behemis. Someone is bringing 3 animals as a carbon. But it didn't specify. So halacha is, that which is fit to bring as a chatas. So, for example, the kivsa. So tikach of chatas. That should be brought as a chatas. L'oila, which is fit as an oila, for example, like keves. Tikach of oila should be brought as an oila. L'shlamim, which is fit as a shlamim, for example, an ayil. Tikach of shlamim should be brought as a shlamim. Amai, why? What do you mean ha'amrit? But you said behema lav k'mavaresh as damya. An animal is not like it's specific. In other words, you wanted to prove from Rav Chizda that birds are like stumen. That's why you wanted to say that you could go ahead and have the kohen decide it when it's going to be sacrificed by the kohen. So here also by an animal, why don't you say that they're like stumen and not like mefurashin? So therefore you have a question over here. Why does Shimon Gamliel consider them as mefurashin? Meaning when you bring 3 animals, you didn't say which one. You brought a kivsa, a keves, and an ayil. Shimon Gamliel says that okay, whatever they're fit for, that's what they can be brought as. But why? You told me that the birds are considered stumen. That's what you brought me from Rav Chizda, and that's why you're asking on me. You're saying that mo'is v'lo oifes, and I'm saying okay, maybe in the chanami. You say no, it's not mo'is v'lo oifes, because you see Rav Chizda says that the kohen could decide which bird is which. But that obviously makes it stumen because it was mefurash, and then they all should go liyam melech. But then, what do you do with this mission of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg? Shloimy Schwartzberg obviously is saying that by behema it is like mefurash. So that's his response back. So on that, as Taisus, he says, "Wait a second, how can you compare the 2 cases?" But the animal that we had mentioned on the previous daf, that we said are considered like stumen, that we said is not fit for a nazir. That we said, for example, when the 3 bulls. Now, that's for sure like stumen. But the animals that Rabbi Shloimy is talking about over here is that these animals are fit for the nazir. So, of course, we're going to consider it as mefurashim. So, what are you asking and saying that why the animals should be considered as stumen? No, stumen are only when they have they can't be used for the nazir. But when they could be, Oh, of course, then we'll consider it as mufurashin. So he says, no. What the Gemara's question, what he's responding back is that if you say, like Rav Huna said, by behemoths, which are 3 bulls, they consider as somewhat mufurashin, meaning, like what we said, what's called mufurashin b'tarayves, that it's like, okay, it's specified but mixed together. So the halacha b'shem would make sense that we would consider the 3 animals that are fit for the Nazir as totally separated, as if he specified this is the chatas, this is the oil, this is the shlam. But if you say that the 3 bulls are like stumin totally, so here also, even though they're fit for the Nazir, we should not have considered it as totally as mufurashin, because it's a longer scale. In other words, I could understand that if you want to say that it's like somewhat, fine, but if you tell me it's totally like stumin, like you want to bring from the halach of Rav Chizda, then how would it be possible that even though it's valid, that it'd be totally brought for their specific karbanas and not like mufurish b'tarayvus. Then says Taisus, and again this is on the bottom of the Taisus over here, which we're going to get back to the Taisus that we skipped, this big one. He says, wait a second, what's the Gemara's question? Maybe B'Shem Gamliel is talking about that the Nazir subsequently went and he specified at the time of the Hakrava which one's chatas, which one's oil, and which one's shlamim. So maybe that's why it's going to be brought as what they're supposed to be. So Taisus says that, first of all, the wording doesn't sound like this, because it just said if he brought 3 animals in Malay Pirish. Sounds like that, okay, whatever's fit for oil would be brought as an oila. And it sounds like that now, even before that krava, it's going to have halacha, and continue on with Beis and Taisus, that it's going to have a title of oila, even to have me'ila on it, even if the owner died, where it goes for Misa, let's say by the behemoth's chatas. So you see that's even before he would go in himself and designated b'shas krava. Also, if by you telling me mufurashin is when he explicitly said at the time of krava, then what's the chiddush of B'Shem Gamliel? Of course, he specified. So that's what you're seeing from this halacha of that he's responding, and you see from B'Shem Gamliel that no, not like you're saying that it's not considered as stumin. You see, it's considered as mifurashin. But then says Taisus, wait a second, what's the havmin of Rav Papa to say this? What do you mean? But you see clearly from Rav Chizda that oifers are like stumin. So the same thing is by behem. In other words, up until this point, whoever's listening might have thought that you're avoiding the whole point. The point was we wanted to say moitz v'la oifers. So he says, how can you say that? Rav Chizda says that by oifers, by the kohen gets to decide. Obviously, we consider it as stumin. So you tell me, oh, the tameich, what do you do with Reb Shimon Gamliel? Okay, but Rav Chizda clearly said by oifers like stumin. So the same thing we would say is like by behema. So what are you bringing me from Reb Shimon Gamliel? So this is, you could be matchik and say Rav Papa held that Rav Chizda was a mistake in halacha. But this says you can't say that because many times we bring in Shas this halacha Rav Chizda. So he says you have to say that Rav Papa most definitely held that even if you're going to say that oifers are like stumin, but we're not going to exclude it from the halacha of money. Wait a second. How does that work? That meaning that's because we're not going to exclude only something that's similar to monies, which is not fit for akrava. For example, let's say parim, which is not fit for the nazar for akrava. But oifers, which they themselves are fit for akrava, we're not going to exclude it from the halacha mishmei Sinai, that if it's mois stumin, that's going to be yipul in the dava. And the same thing is that most definitely it's like stumin that it'd be brought as nadava. So that's where we're up to right now. Where the Gemara is in this place where Rav Papa responded and he says, "What is it? According to your reasoning that you're saying that oifais will be considered as mois, then what do you do with this halacha B'Shem Gamliel that says by the behemoths that they're like mufurashas dami?" And you said a behema like oif is not mufurashas dami. But now let's go back to the big Taisus on this third line down from the top of the Amid. Taisus wants to know, what's the Gemara's question? But we said previously that when we say this halacha with moistum was said by money, not by behema, the reason is because there's a delay of time. Like we said, because you have to wait till it develops a blemish. But these birds are fit for akrava, and you don't need any delay. So there's no concern that maybe he's going to think in his heart which one would be chatz, which would be oila, which would be the problem of mufurashin. So what's the whole question that you have with Eifes, that, like you're telling me, money and not behemoth, so you should say something about Eifes. You see, Rav Chizda says, no, Eifes, the Kohen could decide. Yeah, because I told you, the whole reason why I told you behemoth not, because there's a delay. It takes time to develop a blemish, and then the guy might think, and I want this to be chatas. Now it's not stum anymore, it's meforashin, but it's b'tachavis, I throw it all out. But you don't have the problem with birds. It's kosher of birds. Says Taisus that L'ma'isa, since the owner didn't specify when he bought it, so then he doesn't have the ability anymore to designate them, because it has to be separated when the kohen makes it. Now, what the kohen makes is not in the authority anymore of the owner. So therefore, Taisus says no. You could say that after he bought it, maybe he's going to think, "Oh, I would like it like this." You would say normally, why would he do that? Just go sacrifice it. But it's not true, because he doesn't get to decide anymore. The kohen gets to decide. So therefore, the guy might think. So therefore, that would be the same thing as mo'is behema. Even though behema is because of the amount of time you have to wait, and here you don't have to wait. But it's still the same concern that the guy might think, I want it to be something. And it's like a hafrasha. Right. But still, right. So that's what Taisa asked. Next part of Taisa is, but it's not effective what the owner is separating after he bought it. Right? That's your question. Taisa says, you're right. Although it's not effective, what the owner is separating after he bought it, to verify which one will be sacrificed to chatzis, which will be sacrificed to oila, but it will be effective to make it like it's a taroivus. And you have to be concerned that maybe he did think about after he bought it which one should be a chatzis, which should be a oila, which now it's a mixture, and now the kohen cannot sacrifice anymore according to what he wants to, which one's a chatzis, which is an oila. And that's where the Gemara asks and says, wait a second, if you're going to say that, okay, maybe moist means v'lo oifis, but Rav Chizda said that after you bought it, the next step, it will be dependent on the kohen making it. But it sounds like that if the kohen makes it, it will work. Now, so where the owner didn't specify when he bought it, but the question is, but maybe the guy thought he does want to pick this one. I like this one, should be my chadash and my oila. And that's like mefurash metarayvis. So how could you say that when it's separated through the kohen, it's going to be valid? To the contrary. The kohen should not be allowed to make one for chatzis, one for oila, according to his intention, if he doesn't first ask the owner, did you think about the birds at any point in time, which one's oila, which one's a chatzis? Because if he doesn't ask them, maybe he's going to do opposite of what the owner had thought about.
Why can't we do a pecking order? Like, in other words, either a statistical concept or... You
have the pragmatic questions usually get us on the pragmatic. Like, why don't we figure out like a pecking order? Like, it's a good question, but the point is like you have to ask the guy. You have to ask. No. If this is what my regular guy was alive, but he brought birds. The halacha Rav Chizda said, which brought many times in Shas, that it's either b'lekichas bailam or basiyas kohen. Once you bought it and you didn't specify then, you can't specify. The kohen gets to specify. The question is, how did the kohen get to specify? Maybe the owner thought about it because he's like, oh shoot, I didn't think about it when I bought it. I should have thought. I would like that one to be the chatas, that one to be the oila. So if the kohen now doesn't ask him, so the question is, how do we let the kohen do it? So that's what the Gemara's question is. Obviously, when the fact that Chizda said that it gets specified when the kohen makes it, obviously we're not concerned that maybe the owners maybe thought about one over the other, or even if he did, it's it doesn't make a difference because he didn't explicitly say anything. Oh, so that's the Gemara's question. Same thing is for the case of the animal or the pile of beams, which they are like totally unspecified. They should be yipul in the dava, and you shouldn't say it's dafka by monies because just like by birds, where they're also unspecified for their designated purposes, where the kohen could do whatever he wants to a chatas, whichever the oila. So why didn't you say that those are also considered as stumim? That's how Taisus explains the Gemara's question.
Wouldn't a person who wants, like, if they're so meticulous and so careful, I think a person would do that. Like, people are very, like...
He would do what?
A person who's so makbid on what color bird goes to what, and is a person of designation.
That he would have done it when he bought it?
When he bought it, would designate. And if he didn't...
But then you have those people. You have all those people that they wake up. They're always too late.
Those people aren't designating at the time.
Not at the time of purchase.
They're not designated even after, once it's in the Kohen's
No, you don't have
hands.
those guys who like, I should have gotten that one. I really would like that one,
That's Nazir.
I'm sure he also doesn't want it to be in the Yam HaMelech and
Right.
not
Yeah.
serviceable.
In the Commandment, right. Right. If he knew that, he wouldn't. Right. But Al-Kaman, that's the Gemara's question. Now, this is where it gets a little bit lengthier, where the Ram asks on this, and he says, wait a second. Since you're asking from the Kohen's ability to make this pair of birds, like we explained, so instead of asking for Ram Chizda, why don't you ask for many Mishnayos Masechtas Kinan? When there it talks about by where you have unspecified pairs of birds that were never specified by the owner when it was bought, which sounds like the Kohen gets to verify when he's doing it. It's what do you need Rav Chizda for? You should ask on any time, how could he do it if it's not like, it shouldn't be like Stumah, it should be like Mufurashin. Additionally, says the Ram, what's the question really? That how are we concerned that the owners verified opposite of what the Kohen's doing? But they themselves, this sounds like a little bit your type of question, but they bring itself to the Kohen to be makvit however he wants to, which one's a Oila, which one's a Zachatas. So therefore, obviously they didn't specify anything. And I would tell you that you're right. When he doesn't bring it at the end of the Kohen, that would be like this case of Mefurashim B'Tarayvis, like a pile of beams or like the thing of silver. But what's the Gemara asking when he brings it to the Kohen? Additionally, how does it help the owner separating B'Tarayvis after he bought it, that we're concerned that maybe he thought about it, that he had in mind one over the other, that now the Kohen can't change it anymore? How is it any more than if he explicitly says this one's a Chatas Oil, which does not help once you bought it? Because we said it's either B'Keichas B'Amasis Kohen. So what's this concern? It doesn't even help. So therefore the Ram says it appears to him that the Gemara's question is actually on a different point. The Gemara had said, Mois v'loi behema. This halacha of Mois, Tumim, Yipul, and Davar is only money, not animal. In other words, because there's a delay. And like we said, because maybe he thought to specify in the mixture, in the amount of time, the days that he has to wait, that between when he separated and when he's being makavit. So even when he mentioned explicitly which one's the chatzah, which is the oila, that his specification will establish which one's the chatas and which one is the oila. That even after the owner bought it, just like you could turn that maybe he's thinking about it in Tarabis after he bought the animal, so that's the Gemara's question. You should be concerned by oifis, because there's no svar for the questioner to differentiate between behem and oifis. And just like you say over here, it's effective that the owner what he did after he bought, so too over here. And that's the Gemara's question. And the Gemara is asking on that. Rav Chizda said, meaning, obviously it's not effective what the owner specified between the buying, which is the afrasha, and between the akrava by the kinin. And so too we could presume the same thing would be by other karbanas. So therefore that's actually the Gemara is asking on that presumption. That's how the Ram explains. But on that says that's also difficult. Because this Rav Chizda says that the kinin are not misparishes, something specifically kinin, because it doesn't say karbanas. So what are you asking from kinin onto the other karbanas? What you were saying that in the previous Gemara of Mois v'loi behema. Additionally, even if you're going to say that you should learn the other karbanas from Kinan, but actually there's no svara to compare it to Kinan, because only a carbon that's fit for hakrava, they themselves, like that of the Kinan, but let's say a bar of silver or a pile of beams, then not. And so to Param B'Seirim regarding the Nazir, which they themselves are not fit for hakrava themselves, you cannot learn that from Kinan. And also, why is the Gemara so lengthy in the words? It's saying, what's the reason the rabbis that they say, etc. The Gemara could have asked this all the way in the beginning on Rav Huna, that he says, but Behem is like Mefareshes. The Gemara should have asked over there. Really? Is Behem like Mefareshes? But Rav Chizda says, etc. And the Gemara could have proved that it's not effective what you separate by the owner in between, according to the opinion of the Ram. He says also the wording is difficult because the Gemara comes out and says, oh, I hamois gemirla. But according to the Ram, that's not the main point of the Gemara's question. So what are you asking? Additionally, what's difficult is, according to that interpretation, the Tosfos explain that this that you're saying mois v'lei behema and v'lei nascha, because there's a amount of time, here's where he starts shifting in the whole logic of the halacha. We said from Rabbeinu Tam that because there's a delay, we're concerned that maybe he was thinking about to specify in the mixture in that amount of time that has to wait. Says Tosfos, that's a deicha gadol, because this reasoning is not alluded to anywhere in the Gemara. No one in the Gemara doesn't say this thing. We're concerned that he's going to be thinking or whatever. So therefore, Tosfos says a whole different interpretation, like Rashi says, Pirsha Kunchas. This that the Gemara says mois v'lei behema v'lei nascha, etc. Yeah, it's because of a delay of time, but not because we're concerned that maybe then in that period of time he's going to think about which one he wants, and therefore it's like a taroivus in his heart. No, very simply, it's like a real like a halachic definition. Because the halacha Meshem was said with the following words. Ma'oi stumim yiplu nadava, like the words in the Mishnah. That's what the Gemara is coming to say. Oh, the halacha Meshem said, I'm money, not an animal. Why? Dafka, not an animal that's a temima, because that's not fit for the nazir to sacrifice, like for example bulls or seirim, or let's say a nascho or a pile of beams, which is the same thing, which the chiddush that Damarim are coming to tell us. Don't say the halacha Mesina was said regarding anything that's not fit for akraba, similar to monies, that you cannot sacrifice the monies, like nascha and a pile of beams, and like bulls regarding the nazir. No, don't say that, because it was said specifically by monies that then it's going to be yipul in the dava. Oh, the reason is because you only have what the halacha Mesina tells you. But a behema balas mum, that's like money, because that you could use right away, just like money. And even the halacha Mesina that says explicitly money, a behemoth's balas mum is included in that because that's similar to money totally, which you could use it right away. And that's what we said previously, that tana benazav v'chol the damile, anything that's similar to that, even though the halacha Mesina was said with those words, it means anything similar to that, a behemoth's balas mum is similar to that. But a bar of silver or a pile of beams is not really similar, because it, like we said in the first interpretation, that is excluded from the halacha Mesina that was said regarding monies, because that you can't sell right away. Oh, so that's what the Gemara is asking and saying, wait a second. What's the reason of the rabbis that they said that it's by money and not animals? If that's the case, that you're saying it's specifically monies, then that should also tell us monies, not birds. In other words, as Torah says, it's a temiyah. In other words, if one of the obligations of a pair of birds, or another tummy that he separates turtle doves and birds, unspecified, that he didn't say at the time that he bought and then he died, so wait a second. Here also, it should not fall for Nadava, and we should not consider it as Moistumin, because it's not money. And if you're going to say yes, that was the Gemara's question, but Rav Chisda said, in other words, where the owner didn't specify when he bought it, that it's not specified but when the kohen brings it. In other words, what does the Gemara mean to say now according to this interpretation? That it doesn't have the halacha of mefurashes. It has halacha stumin for all halachas, meaning both for the halacha regarding that a kohen could do whichever one he wants to as a chazal, whichever one he wants to, and that's not the main point. According to the first interpretation, that was the main point. And also regarding that yipul in the dava, like moistumin, if the owner died before that krava. He says that that's how he explained the question that the Gemara is asking from Rav Chisda according to Rashi, and not really from that the kohen gets to make it, like we said in the first interpretation, which that was not asking only like we explained, where it sounds like that if you don't specify the lekicha, so then we said it's not considered as mefurash and rather like stumin or halachas. We're saying that also regarding this is like stumin, that's yipul in a dava. But then one final stretch on Taisi says, okay, so still, what's the Gemara asking from Rav Chisda according to this interpretation? Maybe Rav Chisda only talking about only regarding this, that the owner cannot specify after he bought it, which is not talking about regarding yipul in the dava. You're comparing the halachas of stumin for two different halachas. So it says, no, the Gemara understands it that he's talking about for all halachas, because it's like stumin. Additionally, says Taisus, because if that would be the case, he should have said inakin nikvois, which that would have sounded like it's specific regarding establishing which regarding the kvias of the bailam. Where if you didn't establish at the time you bought it, then you cannot establish anymore, because in general we use the terminology of kvias regarding karbanis. For the fact that we say misparshas, that sounds like for all halachas that it does not have halacha mevarasha as halacha as stumin, both regarding the halacha of stumin that it's being yipul in the dava, and also regarding that of that the kohen only he gets to decide. Oh, now the wording that the Gemara comes out makes a lot of sense. When the Gemara comes out and says, wait a second, but mois gmiri, obviously that we're saying it's lav dafka money, because you're saying the oifis is the same thing. And then obviously then it's lav dafka money, could be even behemoth naschal and sabakachas, and that was the question of all those previous Amara. And as it says, if you're going to say according to Rashi, that he explains that the Gemara's question is moitzvah oifis, that the questioner wants to say that oifis tumen should fall in the dava, but the Gemara in Shavuos says that you cannot use for the kayitz hamizbeach oilas ha'oif. Says Taisus, that's only by the meisin nesachim or other meisters. When you have leftover funds, those funds cannot be used to buy birds for kayitz hamizbeach. But if the birds themselves are left over, like mesa bailam before that kravas kahanim, then actually the oifis could be for the kayitz hamizbeach. Or another Torah says actually the question over here does not hold like the mandam and Shavuos, because that's actually a teaching of anamayra. So a very different interpretation of what the Gemara's question was, that it wasn't because of the delay of time that then you're going to think about something else. It simply doesn't fit into the categorical definition of mois, which could be used right away. This cannot be used right away. So as we continue with the Gemara, so the Gemara had responded with Reb Shimon Gamliel that said, What do you mean? I could show you. You want to tell me that behem is not is lav k'mefareshes dam as you bring from Chisda. You see Rav Shimon Gamliel. So Malay. So on that he said to him that no. Rav Shimi answered. He said, "Hasam over there, the lakach v'asam rachmana." It says the kohen will take. Lakach he will take, and also he'll make it. Meaning, either with the owner buying it or the kohen making it. So this is in the middle of Tosis the Amad Beis. In other words, if the bailim were not mafresh it when he bought it, so then it's like stumin. But he says hachanami here also. What here also? Here also that the halacha of Rav Huna that said that by oifes that's like stumin, because it's not evident from the birds themselves which one's the chatz, which is the oila. The Gemara continues Amid Beis and says, "Mimis Amar, could you say hadin the chatz is tikkur of oila, that the one that's the chatz should be brought as the oila, but the hachan nekeva, but this is a female which has to be a chatz. Hachazacher is a male, it has to be an oila. So like Tais says, the same thing is, let's say when you mafresh 3 bulls. It's not evident from the animals of the bodies themselves anything, which one's the chatz, which one's the oila. So therefore you could say that's like stumin totally. But here in the Mishnah, what do you bring from Shimon Gamliel, which says 3 animals that are fit? It's evident from the animals of the bodies themselves, which one's the chatz, which is lamim. Because a kif says obviously chatz, because chatz is brought as a female. You can't say it should be brought as an oila. Because oila is brought from a zacher, which is a kevis. So the ayil is explicit in the passage that's brought as a shlamim. So the kif says of a chatz, a kevis oila. So therefore obviously it's like a mefarashim dami. Because no greater mefarashim than this. But what I was talking about regarding the animals, the 3 bulls, they're like stumin. There it doesn't say that what it is, and therefore, so Rav Shimi was saying that my question on those manda amrim still stands. I was saying that they're telling me, this is specifically of mois v'loy behema v'loy nascha v'loy sabish hakayres. So he says. So he says, but what do you mean? What's pshat? You see the halacha of Chisda that by oifes we don't consider it as mefarashim, we consider it as stumin. What's the difference between birds and animals? And that he says, what do you mean? I could show you that you see behemoth lav k'mefarashes. He says, not true. Behemoth is not. You're right. Behemoth is not lav k'mefarashes. There, that it's like mefarashes simply because the animals themselves are fit for the karbanis, and you can't say one's not what it is. So the Gemara continues and says, Masav Rav Nuna. Rav Nuna asks, he says, wait a second. He's asking under Rav Nachman. You said that a behemoth bal mum is like kistumim dami, is like moi stumim. He says, do we say behemoth bal mum kistumim dami? Is that really so? That an unblemished animal is like, so again, we switched. We left over to Rav Shimi Ba'ash's question that, like, yeah, you see not like those man the amram, because the response the Republic gave him was not correct, because that's because they were explicit in their own animals. Now we're going back to Askan of Nachman that said that a behemoth b'almum is like stumah. Says, I toshama. This way actually goes on to a whole different discussion of the Gemara, but simply because it brings in another halacha to prove this point. Toshma Linda Braisa, Ketzad Amor Ish Megaleach on the Ziras Aviv. When did we say that a man could cut his hair, meaning bring the ceremony of the karbanis, for the monies that his father had separated for his nazirs? So on that says the Braisa Bizman Shahaya, and the Girsa takes out some words over here. Bizman Shahaya Aviv Nazir. That's the way you should read it. When his father was a Nazir, the way the Bach brings it. The Ifrish Aviv Moiz Nazirus, and the father separated monies for his naziris, meaning unspecified funds. Umason he died. And the son says, I'll be a Nazir on the condition that I could cut my hair on the funds of my father. Okay, so the Bach here in the Beis, he says the word should say over here, Ein ze megalech on mois aviv. So that's a case where he cannot cut his hair on his father's funds. Now, Tosis' girsa is, no, Tosis at the end says there are opposite girsais of his, which is what the Bach brings. So he says, no, that's the case in his different maskul, Duhush megalech on mois aviv. This is where he could cut his hair on his father's funds. In other words, even though Tosis Bavarns, he says, even though later on we bring that if the father separated funds for his chatas, which let's say ate chaylev and he died, and the son is also chayiv because he also ate treif, he cannot bring his chatas from his father's funds that he separated. But here's Allah seen by Nazir that he could cut his hair on the funds that his father separated for his naziris. But it's specifically only if the son did not take the neder when his father was alive, as we go on and we explain this. But if he took the neder when his father was alive, then not. as we learned, but it says over there, of Misha Yehuv, of Nazir, both of them were Nazirim, and the father separated monies, in other words, unspecified funds, and he dies, and the son says, okay, I want to now cut my hair, my father's funds, then they cannot cut on them. Then it has to be Yiplan Dava, because that's Allah Chamisha Sinai. He says again, some Svarim have a gear opposite. Again, this is not our main point anyway, but okay, then he could cut his hair with that funds. And now the Gemara continues, says, now if he had unspecified funds, Yiplan Dava. So again, depending on how you read the previous, so like Taisa says, that's when it'll be Yiplan Dava, because let's say he was alive, whatever. But continues the Braisa, let's say the father had an animal that he had already separated, and he dies. So if it's a chatas, Thomas, it's going to be left to die. Oila, tikkur oila, we brought as oila. Shlam, yikar b'shlam will be brought as shlam. Okay, but our main point is this next point. My love, isn't it a fila balas mum, even if it was blemished? In other words, isn't this halacha that you said if the father separated 3 animals that are blemished and he dies, that we're going to have given the halacha as mufurashes, b'tarayves, that they're left to die, and we don't give it the halacha of mois tumen, to redeem it and to bring with them an adava, because bali moment are like mufurashin. So the Gemara, no, this halacha was said specifically regarding tamima. In other words, we don't find the halacha mufurashes only by behemoth tamima, but balas moment, that will still stand, like we said, that it'll be like kistumim. Says the Gemara, wait a second, of balas mum, is that really so that you're saying kistumim dami is like unspecified? If that's the case, my area, why are you picking a case of telling me that when it's going to be Yiplan Adava, you pick Mois? Look at the Bryce. We said, Mois Tumas, Yiplan Adava. What do you mean? Why are you picking in the ratio Mois? If I had a blemish, Yiplan Adava would fall on the Dava, because, as Taisa explains, that it makes more sense to say the halach of Stomim Forashis all with animals. Which Taisa says, wait a second, why didn't you ask in the Mishnah? The Mishnah also said Mois Tumi Yiplan Adava. If Behemoth Balas Mum is like Mois, Stumas, why didn't you say Behemoth Balas Mum? Says no. From the Brisa we could ask, because it sounds like the whole Brisa is talking about Stumim Meforashis. So say it all regarding Behemoths and differentiate in Behemoths itself whether it's Balas Mum or Tamimim. But in the Mishnah, we said Mois Meforashis. And therefore we want to say then Mois Stumin. We want to differentiate all the money. So therefore we don't ask on the Mishnah, why don't you say Behemoth Balas Mum to be like Stumin B'Makam Mois. But here where you're talking about this halach itself, so pick Behemoth Baal Mum instead of saying Mois. Says you're right. Balas Mum L'mai Kadisha, when you have a blemish, and what's it sanctified for? L'demei for money. Demei Haina Mois. Interesting to Teretz the Gemara saying, when we said in the Mishnah Mois, it meant Behemoth Baal Mum. Okay, Mosav Rava. Rava asked on Rav Nachman further. There's a pasuk in Mayikra that says Karbane, which Tosfos brings the parasha of Im Nasi Yechta. There's 3 times it says Karbanai. One's by the Nasi, one's when you bring a kivsa, and one's when you bring a se'ira. Different karbanas. Now, but the word karbani tells us the following drasha. But karbana hu yaitz, a person can fulfill his obligation with his own carbon, but the any to carbon of he cannot fulfill his obligation with his father's carbon, which says it's sarchin. What do you need a pasuk for? It's a chata shemesa ba'leh. Of course, it goes lamisa. And what's the Gemara saying afterwards? But you would think you do yaitz is carbon of how could you be yaitz? Okay, but that's the question Taisa has. Al karbani says it has to be his carbon, not his father's carbon. Says the Brisa further, you would think, okay, when are you not fulfilling your obligation with your father's carbon? Let's say you separated from a lesser aver, ala chamura, on something that's more severe for the son. So it won't work because the son's obligation is more severe. Or maybe something severe on something that's lesser. You would think, okay, but if it's the same lighter avera, it should work for both. They're both severe. It says karbonai again, which tells us karbonai, but karbonai yaitzev and yaitzev become shalav. No, only with his own carbon, not with his father's carbon. Now, again, yochel yaitzev become anav. You would think you cannot fulfill the obligation with your father's carbon, but by the animal that he separated, let's say a lesser one and a lesser one, severe and severe. Because a person cannot go ahead and do his hair cutting ceremony on the animals that his father separated by naziris, as we say at the end of the parak, that he cannot be galeich on naziris of, only on the mois tumen, where it doesn't mention the wording of the Mishnah, but mois tumen, which Allah Mashmasin is said by mois tumen dafka, which actually, okay, this actually doesn't even belong here anyway, but you would think, okay, maybe the father's animals you can't use, but monies that the father specified, the film even severe on lesser, or lesser on severe, that maybe that should work. Because you know the halacha is that a person go ahead and do his karbanis from monies that his father had by naziris. Now, even though the monies were designated for chatas for his father, which in such a situation actually you cannot be Melech HaMosh Aviv, but still, since we find somewhere that you can Melech HaMosh Aviv, you would think that it would work as a continued tabach of Chazam al B'manchein Stumin when they're unspecified, B'alai B'manchein Mefarashin, now when they're specified. Tamalayma, that's what it says. The third time the word Karbana, no, but Karbana Yaitze, B'en Yaitze B'Karban Aviv, he could only fulfill his obligation with his own carbon and not with his father's carbon. So again, we're still in the middle of the brisa, which we're going to continue and learn from there this question that Rabbi wants to have, asking on this teaching of Rav Nachman, which says that Behemis Baal's Mum is considered as Mais. That we'll see on the next daf exactly what his question is from this brisa. Thank you for any time for hosting us.